Now, I'm not expecting anyone to watch this live. It's just because I'm sat in the office and I've been editing and I'm trying out different formats. So, I will repost this after I'm done. I have said that this week I would try and address, he says, the issue of whether you should or shouldn't seek a diagnosis of this if you think you may or may not have ADHD. And the only way I think I can address this is by sharing my own experience. I was diagnosed at the end of 2019, December, I think. I can't even remember the actual date. And I was diagnosed because I reached rock bottom. I was 45, nearly 46 years old. And I was absolutely knackered. I mean, like, finished, knackered. I've joked often in stand-up and said that I've been fired more times than a rifle, but that's no exaggeration. I've lost count of the amount of jobs I've been fired from. I've also lost count of the amount of jobs and really positive experiences that I've just walked away from or almost deliberately sabotaged. And I could never understand why. And I've gone through a lot of things that I think a lot of adults who get diagnoses late in life go through as well. I was misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder. I was told by one psychiatrist, I think he was a psychiatrist. Yeah. Anyway, Egypt, I was told that I was just immature and needed to grow up. But kind of always knew something wasn't right. I got an informal diagnosis, if you can call it that, from a world-leading specialist in Asperger's years ago now, 6 years ago, who literally through email conversations with me and a 10-minute chat at a conference, as much as said, go home, do this online assessment, you've got ADHD, it may help. He was right. But it took until the end of 2019 for me to hit rock bottom. And I hit rock bottom because I was tired of fighting. I was tired of finding things so difficult. I was tired of wondering why I couldn't make lists and stick to them, why I'd not got the careers that family had and friends had, and why I'd not managed to climb a corporate ladder of any kind. And I'd been in business by then for almost 10 years on my own. And my business had gone up and down and nearly folded several times. And I just got to a point where I was tired. So originally, thinking I need a diagnosis, having spoke to my wife who agreed, and I think had been looking into ADHD properly way before me, I went to my doctor, NHS, and was told very frankly, very honestly, very kindly, yes, looking at the online assessment you've bought me, it's very likely you've got ADHD. But an NHS referral could take anywhere from 12 months to 2 years, and that's just for a referral, not a diagnosis even. I came away from that appointment probably more depressed than when I went in, with a box of antidepressants that I refused to take because I wasn't depressed. And then a couple of weeks later, I fully cracked. Something occurred and I fell apart and I sobbed, and I admitted that I'd had awful thoughts for a long time and felt useless and wondered what the point was and wondered why you want to carry on. And after speaking to my parents, explaining things and doing some real research into private diagnosis, we found a clinic. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of what was said in my diagnosis and why. I've put it out there on record. I was diagnosed with the most severe combined subtype lifelong disabling ADHD that it's possible to have. And I'd lie if I didn't say I was shocked at the severity, but it is what it is. But I wouldn't be sensible if I said that was right for everyone. Going through diagnosis, getting a label, if you want, isn't the be all and end all. I knew that I needed, I suppose, to look into it more, to get more help, because I was never going to cope, and I'd finally realised that. But there are people who can be aware that they may be ADHD, they may score high on an online assessment, and actually that's all they need. Maybe they're borderline is the wrong term, but they can cope. Yo, Brad, I'm just waffling because it's an easy way of doing a video, my friend. Anyway, what I mean is it's not right for everyone. However, there are a few people who, since I started this page, have reached out to me privately and said, diagnosis or not diagnosis. So I want to address a couple of things. Somebody said privately to me that they were really worried about getting a diagnosis. They were worried what that would mean. So I guess there's lots of things you could worry about. You could be worried about, does it change you? Does it change the way people think about you? Does it affect your job? Does it affect your career? Do you have to tell anyone? Okay, so I've looked into this. I've spoken to psychiatrists and lots of people about this. If having a diagnosis of ADHD is very, very severe, if, like me, you're at the far end of the squirrel scale, and you're in a job where it would be important for people to know that, if it hasn't already been blatantly obvious, then yes, it's recommended that you let your employer know, but you don't have to. You don't have to disclose anything. If you're on medication, or if you are prescribed medication, bearing in mind that we're talking about very strong stimulant medication, there are cases where people have been pulled over driving because of erratic driving, been breathalyzed, and when that substance is found in your bloodstream, and it will raise questions, because to all intent and purposes you could just be on speed. So there are people that carry their prescriptions with them in the car. Now I don't, but I can see why people who maybe drive for a living would. But a diagnosis really is a personal thing. If you're going to go through the process of a diagnosis and you're going to bare your soul to a clinician, a psychiatrist, or whoever, you're doing it to get answers for you and likely for your family, to help you and they understand perhaps why you do the things you do, have done the things you have done, and what maybe you can do to make life easier. And that's certainly why I did it. I mean, who'd have known that shortly after I got my diagnosis, COVID would hit. So instead of me having kind of a quote-unquote normal year to cope with this, I ended up having to reinvent myself over and over again. So I've not had a chance to do a lot of the things and learn a lot of the things that I still need to learn about being an adult with ADHD. My medication, for example, has just changed because, who knew, but your body gets used to it and it had stopped working. I didn't know that. So a diagnosis for me has been really useful, really important, and it continues to be. And it's led to me researching more, reading more, reaching out to people more, finding out about what it means. But a diagnosis, I think, is personal. It isn't something to be afraid of if you know it's right for you. But if you're being told by other people you should get a diagnosis, if you are being, shall we say, coerced into a diagnosis, then maybe that's not right for you. Maybe that's other people wanting that more than you. Years and years ago now, when I was at college, I studied marketing. And there was a principle we used in our lectures to decide if a product was worthwhile or a slogan was worthwhile. And it was based on the image of a set of rugby goalposts with some birds on top. And it was known as the who, why, when, where, what, and how diagram. Okay, so 5 W-shaped birds sat on a H-shape goalpost. And it was a really useful tool. And it's one actually I think you can apply to a diagnosis. So if you're thinking about this, or other people are telling you to think about this, get a piece of paper now, after you've watched this, and write those words down. Who, why, when, where, what, and how. And next to each of them, try and put a statement or two about ADHD and how it impacts you or affects you, or you think it's impacted you, or how other people, your partner, your spouse, thinks it's impacted them. Who's an obvious one? Who is it affecting? Is it just you? Is it other people? When did you notice? When did they notice? What do you do that other people say isn't, I hate to use the word, but normal? Why do you think now is the right time to go for a formal diagnosis? And what do you expect to come of it? And the how, being the biggest part of this, is how are you going to go about it? I can only be brutally honest here and say I have to thank my parents with literally my mental health, or my life if you like, because a private diagnosis and the period of adjustment on medication, if you are medicated, is expensive. Very expensive. And you've got to be prepared for that expense if you go down that route. A NHS diagnosis could take years, as I said, and depending on where you live, particularly in the UK, you may not have a GP surgery who will actually fund the medication. They may refuse. It's expensive. This is not your normal, whatever it is nowadays, £9.50 prescription. This is a controlled drug. So you've got to be prepared for everything. And if you're not, then maybe going a formal diagnosis isn't the right route for you. But if you are, prepare well in advance. There is a ton of information online, more ordered, more probably coherent than this, that will help you understand what a diagnosis may or may not entail and may mean. But as I'm sitting here wearing a t-shirt with the words emblazoned on them, albeit back to front, but it's not for you to wear it on your sleeve if you don't want to. So, diagnosis or not diagnosis really depends on you. But nobody can tell you if it's right. I can only say that. Nobody can tell you if it's right. I knew when I got to that point that it was my only option. I had no other option left. And that's why I did it. If you're at that point, then yes, hell yes, do whatever it takes. But if you're not sure, if you think you can probably cope by looking online at information, reading some books and trying to employ some strategies, yeah, go for it. So, I don't know. What do you think? Is it a label for a label's sake? Is it worth it? I can see Brad there is a very prolific businessman around here, and he might have an opinion as an employer as to whether he'd like to know or has ever come across it. I don't know. But from my point of view, when you know, you know. Was it the right thing for me? 100% yes. Am I cured of ADHD? No, never will be. Will it change and morph as I change and my brain develops? Yeah. But I'm happier knowing that I've got a path. I'm happier knowing that whilst I still might be irritable, annoying, short-tempered, grouchy, and all those things at home, and then be able to switch on the entertainer, happy, happy, smiley when I'm at work, I know that I'm doing the things I need to do to get a bit more balance. And I wouldn't have got that. I would never have got that without diagnosis. So there you go. There's a summary that I hope answers that question. I'm sure I'll make another video about this in time. But that's what I think. And I really do have to sort out this lot down here because it's really doing my head in. So there you go. Friday night, 9:45. Diagnosis or no diagnosis? Done.